This is Albert Wesker, and welcome to another episode of Great Men Taking Over the World. Today, I'm going to do a top 10 countdown of my favorite Sony PlayStation games, the PS1. This is not an objective list of the best games for the system. These are my own personal favorites, the games that made an impact on me back in the day and still resonate up to now. So, let's roll. Ridge Racer Type 4. I never really liked any of the Ridge Racer games before it. And then came Ridge Racer Type 4. I rented the game, and I thought this was going to be another disappointing experience. And then I started playing it, and lo and behold, I was so engaged. I stayed up all night, played the game. It was like morning the next day. I was like, oh my god, I beat the whole game in one night. It was so involving. Never before had Ridge Racer been interesting to me. Ridge Racer Type 4 received a complete graphical overhaul. It looks completely different from the earlier, more colorful, zany looking Ridge Racers. This one seems more like a mature racer. There was so many different tracks. There was a bunch of different cars. There was customization features. You could play an entire season with multiple racing clubs. This game had a lot of replay value. One of the best parts of the game was the amazing soundtrack. I mean, these were terrific techno beats. Terrific music. It's just worth listening to it on its own, but as part of the racing experience, it was fantastic. So I would highly recommend this game. This is my favorite racing game for the PlayStation. Disruptor is my favorite first-person shooter for the PlayStation. Now you might say, what about Doom? What about Duke Nukem? What about all the rest of them? Nope. Sorry, they got disrupted. The reason I like Disruptor is the amazing graphics are one thing. I mean, remember, this is 1997. And PS1 first-person shooters did not look that great. And this game looks terrific with its amazing animations, highly detailed environments. You get to travel to all these different exotic locations and levels. Hell, you even go to Mars. I never been to Mars! Get me off of Mars! Yeah, you even get to Mars and go and disrupt some motherfuckers over there. The colors popped. The music was kind of interesting. I liked the weapons. They weren't maybe necessarily as cool as Doom, but they had these psionic powers that you do, like telekinetic stuff that they did, and that was really cool. Also, it was the 90s, so you get those super cheesy full motion videos in between the levels. They were very fun to watch. Back in the day, I mean, that was amazing that you get these full motion cutscenes. You got real actors slumming it in the Z-grade material with terrible cameras and terrible production value. It was funny as hell.
If you are truly committed to defending global democracy, then join us to disrupt Krieger's plans for domination.
But I was just ready to get right back into the next level, just start shooting people up, shooting up them Martians, shooting up them aliens, shooting up them robots with my psionic powers and shit like that. That was one of the unique things about the game. Just a very concentrated sci-fi atmosphere to it, which really spoke to me much more than the other first-person shooters at the time, and that's why I still remember it to this day. Street Fighter Alpha 3 was the climactic conclusion to the Alpha series, and the PlayStation version was very good. Perhaps not as good as the Sega Saturn version, but it was pretty close. Good enough. The anime-inspired art style was very appealing at that time because you just didn't have games that really looked like that back in the day. Remember the original Street Fighter series? They looked totally different. Huge cast of characters. So many different gorgeous environments, the stages I mean, the modes, so many different modes and everything, and unlockable characters. You could play this game for hours and hours, weeks and weeks on end if you want. And you know, you got all your isms, you gotta watch out for those isms, different little fighting styles and combo systems and whatnot. And you gotta love the supers that finish off guys just brutally and awesomely. I just love that flashiness. So definitely Street Fighter Alpha 3, a fantastic fighting game. I would put it up there, rank it pretty close to one of my favorite fighters. Soul Blade is my favorite fighting game for the PlayStation. Now you might say, what about Tekken 3? Yeah, Tekken 3 is very good, but for me, Soul Blade edges it out, no pun intended. Graphics were absolutely gorgeous, garish, sumptuous, luscious. I mean, it was fantastic. One of the beautiful things I liked graphically from the game was that as you're fighting, it simulates time passing, and you can fight across this entire 24-hour period, even though it only passes in a couple of minutes. But it is beautiful to look at, and they got rid of it in the sequels. Speaking of the sequels, 2 years later, after this game came out, 1999, Soul Calibur came out for the Sega Dreamcast, and it bettered Soul Blade in every conceivable way. But I still do have a fondness in my heart for Soul Blade, because this is where it all began. This is where you were introduced to all these marvelous characters. This is where you had all the different modes and different things. One of the things I really like about Soul Blade is the intro. It's one of the greatest intros to any PS1 game ever, and PS1 was very well known for its amazing cinematic intros, and Soul Blade absolutely crushes it. One of the best. I mean, it's terrific. Tomb Raider. In the fall of 1996, there was nothing out there like this game. Nothing except Super Mario 64. Those two games are basically it as far as these 3D kind of exploration games were concerned. And Mario was more of a platform-based game. This game just completely captivated and enthralled me instantaneously. I got to explore these vast environments and run around shooting things. The sense of isolation in the game was really something. And it introduced the gaming world to one of the most iconic video game characters, Lara Croft. This was where it all started. But, being back there in that day and playing it in 96, 97, it was a completely unique experience. Gamers were finally seeing the next generation unfold in front of their eyes. This was something that was impossible for any system before the PlayStation, Saturn, and 64 came around. We knew that we were in this next level, and it was a delight to behold, as game developers were only scratching the surface of what could be done with gaming. Back then, this was about as open world as you were going to get. But it was pretty remarkable. And I'll always have a fondness in my heart for Tomb Raider. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is hands down the best 2D game for the PlayStation. It's a very immersive experience, and that's interesting to say that because the game is a side-scrolling 2D action platform game. How can that be? Well, because it incorporates a lot of RPG elements, a lot of little bit of puzzle solving with item management, leveling up, and things like that. And the massive scope of the game as you explore this colossal castle, Dracula's castle, in Transylvania, right? Where Alucard explores chamber by chamber, secret by secret, level by level. You go underground, you go in these weird water tunnels, and you go all the way up on the roof. I mean, there's so much exploration in this game. It really does feel like some 3D adventure, even though it's a hand-drawn 2D side-scrolling action platformer. One of the most interesting things about the game, and of course the Castlevania series, is this overwhelming gothic nature of the game. The musical score in this game is so varied, so unique and eclectic. I think that it really captures the mood of the game. The library level is fantastic. The musical score there is straight up Baroque. It sounds pretty amazing. And I also love the chapel and all this religious, evocative religious atmosphere they have going on as you're moving up and up and up these steps, and you're going to this almost church or whatever it is. And it's not necessarily an easy game by any means. Castlevania games were always demanding, but this one is definitely worth your time. Just an absolute 2D masterpiece for the PlayStation.
We will meet again. What?
Armored Core. I wanted a game where I could play as a giant robot that would be stomping around, running around, flying around, shooting shit up, destroying stuff. And I wanted that game, and none of the mech games that they had earlier before this just appealed to me in the least. I mean, the game has like 50 different levels, 50 different missions. Some of the levels are as short as 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how good you are, and others can take up an hour. There's a lot of variety and flexibility in the game. The customization features are fantastic. I mean, you can buy and sell anything you want for your mech. You can, trade different parts, customize your own mech, build it from the ground up, from its core up. Deep down, obviously, it's an action game. Run and gun type of insanity. The game gets ferocious. Even the weak, pathetic enemies can be really ferocious in this game. And the gunfights, the firefights, I remember there's so many different levels. The oil refinery level, some of when they drop you into the crater in the middle of the desert, and then you get this badass motherfucker that comes down. They have a ranking system in this game. There's like these top 10 CPU mechs, right? And once in a while you meet some of these mechs alongside in your missions. The battles are just epic. It was a very interesting game, basically a dream come true. What I always wanted, a high-flying, high-intensity mech game with a bunch of customization. I really love this game.
Resident Evil 2.
A masterpiece of a game. The anticipation for this game was huge. I bought it and I beat it in one weekend, and I was disappointed. Why? Because the game was so good, I just wanted the game to continue. Luckily, of course, you get to play with the other character. These two new amazing characters that have stood the test of time in the Resident Evil mythology, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. In almost every way, Resident Evil 2 is superior to its predecessor. The graphics have been improved, the animations of the characters have been improved, the control schemes have been improved, the pacing is better, there's more action, there's more weapons, the enemies, and just the detail and the variety of them are just fantastic. The iconic area of this game is the police department. Who doesn't remember this thing, trying to explore this massive place with all its secret rooms and passageways and zombies lurking around every corner. The game has a much bigger scope. There's a lot more different things that you learn about Umbrella and the rest of it. It really expanded the Resident Evil mythology. That save room music, it obsesses me. I would take quite a bit of time and just sit there in those save rooms and just listen to that melancholic melody that play over and over. It really imprints on the memory of the game, this kind of like overwhelming melancholy to it. At the same time, it is an action horror masterpiece.
Oh boy.
One of my favorite sequences in this game was the William Birkin cinematic scene, where he gets shot up by those SWAT team guys. Oh my god. I mean, you have to remember, back in those days, this kind of cinematic quality was very rare in video games. And Resident Evil 2 was definitely pushing the envelope in every respect. And I remember watching this, I was like, oh my god, I'm playing a movie, this is fantastic. I love this. It's just too much. Too many memories. And one of these days we're going to do a mega review for Resident Evil 2, so stay tuned for that.
What is this thing? Fire! Fire! You son of a...
Resident Evil.
The original Resident Evil, specifically Resident Evil Director's Cut, is one of the most influential video games of my video game life. We did a massive 2-part retrospective review on this game, which goes into a whole bunch of depths, everything you ever wanted to know. Be sure to check out that review. What can I say about Resident Evil? The game was basically a dream come true. It's the kind of game that I fantasize about, but it just didn't exist. And then eventually, Capcom made my dreams come true. All I wanted was this cinematic adventure, this cinematic presentation, this overwhelming horror mystery atmosphere of the game. There was nothing else like it, and so Resident Evil became imprinted on my heart and mind. I really fell in love with this game and this series. The thing that I like most about Resident Evil is this atmosphere. It has never been surpassed in the sequels. Not in Resident Evil 2 or 4 or any of them. Something about that haunted mansion type of atmosphere where you're just exploring room by room, running into enemies. There's a lot of desolation, isolation going on, creepy music, sound effects, everything. Absolute fantastic game. One of my most cherished experiences in video games. Alright, before I reveal my #1 PlayStation game, I'd like to share some honorable mentions with you. Any one of these games could have made this list. They all deserve to be here. They just missed the cut. And if I was doing a top 20, they would all make it. So, here are the honorable mentions.
You win.
Final Fantasy VII. Did you think it was going to be any other game? In September of 1997, Final Fantasy VII was released in the North American market, and it completely revolutionized the industry. Squaresoft made the right choice by picking the PlayStation to unveil this colossal masterpiece. This game was the first cinematic RPG. Once again, it set the standard for what the PlayStation could do. It was a game unlike any other, and I know there's some detractors out there who say, oh no, Final Fantasy VI was better, or Final Fantasy V was better. No, 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 they've all been silenced as time passed. 20 years later, this is the one that's still most fondly remembered. This is the one that the fans demanded a sequel for, they demanded remakes for. Finally, Square is going to do a full HD remake of this game for the current generation. Something that they just simply don't do. One of my favorite moments, when you first leave this colossal city that you've been preoccupied with for hours playing defeating all these enemies. Now you're in this vast open world, and there was just such a breath of fresh air, and it just felt like you're really setting down on the true adventure now, on a true adventurous path. There was other amazing moments. I remember the flashback, Cloud's flashback, his story that he tells his party members about his history with Sephiroth, the main villain of the game. Every time Sephiroth appeared, it was absolutely epic. And this is one of those epic moments that I still remember to this day. There were so many incredibly climactic and epic and melodramatic and fantastical moments in this game that it's hard to remember. You just have to play through the whole colossal experience again to relive all those different plot points and elements and the cast of characters, and as they come and go throughout the game. It felt like it was, made for $100 million. It just had that gigantic kind of quality to it that Hollywood blockbusters had. Out of all the games for PlayStation that I played and I remember, this is the one I recall with most fondness. It hit some sort of specific emotional triggers that were just very unique, and it really takes me back to that time in the 90s. Back to that more simpler time of gaming before all this massively multiplayers and open worlds and everything like this. This was about as massive as adventure as you could get back in the day, and it was overwhelming at the time. Fantastic. You could just get lost playing this game for weeks on end. And as much as I love Resident Evil, I would have to say that Final Fantasy VII is my favorite video game experience, not just on the PlayStation, but for the 32-bit era. It's a game that will live on in the memory of gamers, in their hearts and minds, forever. The PlayStation was an amazing system. It revolutionized the industry, taking gaming to the next level. I hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane. Until next time, this is Albert Wesker, signing off.